introduce our final session for the festival, the closing debate. Pacifism is for losers, presented by Maruti Suzuki. In a fractured world, war seems to be the only solution to many. But are there other paths to peace and harmony? I now invite Managing Director of Teamwork Arts, Sunjoy K. Roy, to join me on stage and host the debate. Thank you.
You all just saw that film. Behind that film is a group of people who have to stay up all night to make that film, to capture the images here. Everybody thinks it's me or Namita or William who put all of this together. There's 100 of our colleagues from Teamwork Arts. There's 400 volunteers. There's 600 press. There's 1,200 service providers. There's 1,400 police, both plainclothes and otherwise, in this area helping us. We have over 4,000 people who make this festival happen. And it's not just about us. We pretend that we are the busy ones, but we are not. It's really them. So please join me in thanking each and every one of our colleagues. I'm going to ask to join Namita and myself. I'm going to ask our producer and Teamwork's creative director, Sharupa Datta, to join us. Our president of Teamwork, who's responsible not just for bringing in all this money that makes this festival possible, but for getting the word out and holding this together. Our producer colleague, Suraj, please come on. Our programming head of program, Kritika, and her colleagues, Neha, Judith, who looks after all our special events, Pinky and her colleagues who are there, Manoj and everybody is all around, Sam, who looks after the JBM, the Jaipur bookmark, and our senior leadership, who I don't see, Ankur, Shams, everybody, Ravina, and my colleagues are behind me sort of giving me the names. I'll never remember. I don't. So, but just from, I think, all of us to all of you, thank them because they make this happen. And especially, a big shout out to our volunteers, 400 of them, and to Yuva Ekta Foundation, who trains them for over 3 months. They've been amazing. Guys, you folks, you've been absolutely incredible. Everybody goes away with a sense of how much love they get from our volunteers, and they're amazing. And they come from across the world and across India. A special shout out for those who've come from Missouri, from the Columbia School of Journalism in Missouri, for joining us for this edition. David Hare, when he opened our first session on the first day here, 5 days ago, which seems like a lifetime, said, theater is not just about the play on the stage or the audience. It's about something in the air that connects the two. And that's what this is about. All of you, each one of you who've traveled from across so far, and we've had people from 47 different countries come together here, registered as part of the festival. Thank you for traveling so far from across 21 states, from across 63 different cities. Thank you, we love you, please keep coming back. But even if you don't, you can watch us online. Remember, at the end of the day, a lot of people have come to me and said, oh my God, I missed this session, and I went to William's session. Everybody goes to William's session. And I didn't go to that session. What should I do? Remember, all of this is online. And it'll be online. You can go to our archives. And please remember also to tag us, follow us, because every week we'll be putting up 2 or 3 new episodes, as well as all of the episodes that happen through the year across the world. So London, Valladolid, Madrid, Houston, Seattle, New York, everywhere else, wherever else we do a JLF. It's that time just to bid you all goodbye, but to say also that in all of this, I hope you've taken with you some of the love, some of the ideas that you've heard share here on this stage. When it's dark out there, you can look for the light. The light is here because of all our writers and authors. A big thank you to them for putting in the energy and time in writing their books and for traveling all the way. Please join me in welcoming Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple.
आज के दिन जैसे हम शादी में विदाई लेते हैं ऐसे ही मेरे दिल में एक दुख होता है, मेरा मुंह भी गिर जाता है. मुझे लगता है इस एक्साइटमेंट के बगैर मैं अब कैसे जीऊँगी बैक टू नॉर्मल लाइफ. बड़ी तकलीफ़ होगी. And as I said, it is a moment of deep joy and deep sorrow. Deep joy that this has been one of the best JLF editions ever. For all of you who think it's the best JLF edition, yay! It's okay, majority. And that's because the weather was good, the speakers were extraordinary, and I'm afraid of perfection. So there were the usual little glitches here and there. वो तो होना ही था. And I don't have too many words to say. We listen into this very important debate, which may sound like an easy debate, but it is one of the most serious questions before our country. Yet I'm sure they'll make us smile as well as we must through all life's travails. Dear William, co-director, Bhaiya.
It's my traditional duty to give you a little taster of next year's initial acceptances. And I have to say, we are going to be welcoming a debut author called Sanjoy Roy to our ranks next year, who's written his first book about his encounters with ghosts. So come along and hear Sanjoy's Spirit World, which I'm much looking forward to reading. We've also got initial acceptances from Bono of U2 for his memoirs. Zadie Smith, Elif Shafak, Miriam Margolyes, James Wood, Claire Massoud, Percival Everett, Tash Orr, Combe Toybin, and on it goes on. Mazda Mengiste, George Saunders. So some very starry names for next year. So it's shaping up for a very, very fine edition. Thank you all for putting up with us. Thank you all for coming, and see you here next year.
I have only one thing to say, which is a big, big thank you to all of you who are here, but more important, all those dozens and dozens of partners that we have. I'm not going to read out everyone, but I have to thank Vedanta and Anil Agarwal Foundation for presenting the festival, for being social impact partners for the festival. We've got Maruti Suzuki, who came in as our associate partner, and Vida as our powered by partner. Apart from that, we have about 30 plus partners from the embassies, the foundations, other corporates. And all I want to say is thank you. Please keep coming back. And our job and our endeavor is to make sure that your brand and your whatever we discuss, we over-deliver. So thank you, everyone. I also want to thank the Leela Palace Hotel and Clark's Amer Jaipur, because without this, we wouldn't be able to get where we are. So I'm not, and I'm sorry if I've omitted any particular name, but we've got a great debate coming up. So thank you, everyone, and please come back soon.
To our content team, to our video team, to our camera team, to our tech team, who else have I, to our finance team, to our legal team, to our bookstore, everybody, thank you. To our products, our merchandising, all of the food people out there, and most importantly, Timmy and Apurv, their family here at Clark's, to Vivek, their general manager, to all of the Clark's family, a big thank you. You know, you've opened your hearts, your home. We've taken it over. I don't know how you sleep at night, given all of that happens. But really, you've brought, in many ways, the world to Rajasthan, to Jaipur, to Clark's Hotel. Thank you both so much for all the help. I'm going to ask Sharupa, our producer, to give you the dates for next year, so all of you can block it in your calendar. Remember, we hold all the rooms just to keep the prices down.
We'll see you back here from the 15th of January to the 19th of January, 2026. Thank you all. You all make us keep coming back. And now over to the debate. Group? Madam? Group picture.
Everything you've seen around, every bit of design is done by our design team, headed by Ujjan and by Tavishi. I don't know where they are, if they're here anywhere. Thank you so much. people who put all of this together, to Sunil, Nawab, and their team, wherever you are, and they get the most shouting from me. Yesterday, Sunil said, "Kuch bhi hoga, aap mujhe dekhte ho." I said, "Kya kare? Aap hi to yahan ka big boss ho." So thank you guys, wherever you are, to friends of the festival, to all of you friends of the festival who've signed up. Apart from being here as our special delegates, remember, you are supporting our festival. That's vital for us, because without your support, this festival is not happening. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
We have so many teams that every time we mention 3, we realize we've forgotten, Sanjay's forgotten 3 or 4 more. So please, now he's cribbing, but please, thank you all. Without this army that works, and this army works really crazily, but honestly, it's all worth it because you all come to engage with it and experience it and, listen in. That is what makes it worthwhile. A big thank you. I mean, we've done it. We've turned 18. We've completed 18. And now over to our 19th year. So over to you now.
Don't take my papers. Whatever you do, don't take my papers. She was stealing my papers. That's the end of the debate. So as all of you know, we look forward to our closing debate. Prabir, you can come up front here. There's place here wherever you're sitting if you want to come, Sumira. Our closing debate is always our most fun, most controversial, and has always captured the imagination of everybody. The proposition for today is pacifism is for losers. In a fractured world, war seems the only solution to many. But are there other paths to peace and harmony? Speaking for the motion, we have Manpreet Vohra, Mukulika Banerjee, Yaroslav Trofimov. Against the motion, Georgina Godwin, Gideon Levy, Salil Tripathi, and it's moderated by Vir Sanghvi. I'm going to invite each of them to come up. Speaking for the motion, Manpreet Vohra, recently retired as High Commissioner to Australia, concluding a distinguished diplomatic career. Over the years, he's lived in 10 countries across 6 continents and served as our ambassador to Afghanistan, Mexico, and Peru, as well as Deputy High Commissioner in Pakistan and Kenya. His postings also included roles in Hong Kong, China, Mongolia, and the United Kingdom. Speaking for the motion, Manpreet Vohra. Speaking against the motion, the bravest journalist in the world, Gideon Levy, an Israeli journalist and author. Levy writes opinion pieces and weekly columns for the newspaper Haaretz. Levy has won prizes for his articles on human rights in the Israeli-occupied territories. In 2021, he won Israel's top award for journalism, the Sokolov Award. Till 2025, he hasn't been arrested, which is the other big award that he's been won so far. Speaking for the motion, Mukulika Banerjee, Professor of Social Anthropology at the London School of Economics. Today is special because Mukulika has been conferred a full professorship at the LSE, and we're very, very proud of her. She pretends that she's younger than me. She's not. She's much older. I'm 32, as you all remember. She's also the author of Cultivating Democracy, Why India Votes, Muslim Portraits, the Sari, which is the reason why we met many years ago in our first festival in London in 2001, I think, and the Pathan Unarmed in 2001. She lives in London and co-hosts the newly launched podcast, The India Briefing. Against the motion, Salil Tripathi is an award-winning correspondent, regular JLF attendee and speaker. He's been writing for Singapore and Hong Kong. His latest book is The Gujaratis, which many of you may have attended his session, a portrait of a community. He has published works like Offense, The Hindu Case, and co-edited for In Your Tongue, I Cannot Fit. He serves on the board of PEN International, and most importantly, he was chair of the Writers in Prison Committee, and during his tenure, he helped release a number of writers incarcerated across the world. Speaking against the motion, Salil Tripathi. Speaking for the motion, Yaroslav Trofimov, a Kyiv-born author. He's published 3 narratives, non-fiction books, and the novel No Country for Love. A foreign correspondent for the Wall Street Journal since 1999, he became the chief foreign affairs correspondent in 2018. He was a Pulitzer Prize finalist for international reporting in 2023 and 2022. And his latest book, Our Enemies Will Vanish, was a finalist for the 2024 Orwell Prize, speaking for the motion, Yaroslav. Speaking against the motion, Georgina Godwin, an honorary fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, she's a broadcast journalist and presents the author interview program Meet the Writers, as well as the current affairs show The Globalist on Monocle Radio. She was a founding member of Zimbabwe's first independent radio station before being declared an enemy of the state and being exiled to London, which is where we met and became friends at many different JLFs, where she chairs some of our sessions. Hosting the debate, we have back our most favorite moderator, Vir Sanghvi. Vir Sanghvi became editor of Bombay magazine when he was 22. And for those of you who haven't read Vir Sanghvi's book, please do pick it up. It tells you the history of Indian journalism all the way from Bombay and Calcutta to across the world. When he became the editor, it made him the youngest editor in the history of Indian journalism. He went on to edit Imprint and Sunday, then India's largest selling weekly news magazine. He's been both editor and editorial director of the Hindustan Times and continued as a columnist and advisor. He also has a significant parallel career as India's leading food and travel writer, which is the reason he and his wife never stay at home. They're always traveling, sampling new food. Ladies and gentlemen, Vir Sanghvi. The rules of today's debate is thus. I'm going to begin by polling the House, and you have to shout and raise your hands if you're for the motion and against the motion. So I'll do that in a bit. Once I do that, Vir will introduce the debate, put it into perspective. We will then ask each of our speakers, they'll be given 3 minutes. At 2 minutes, 30 seconds, they'll be given a warning. At 3 minutes, they'll be drummed off. They will be asked to come back and give a repartee in terms of respond to what their fellow speakers have said, and that'll be 2 minutes each. At which point of time, Vir will pose a series of questions to each one of them. After that, he will open it up to the audience. We will take clusters of questions, no comments, questions, very specifically, otherwise he'll cut you off. We will end with closing comments for 2 minutes each from each of the debaters, and I'll come back to you and I will poll to see whether the poll has moved. In the past, every year, the poll has moved considerably. It's begun always mostly in favor of the proposition, is ended mostly against the proposition. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the time for you to respond and tell us how you see this particular proposition, which is pacifism? Pacifism is for losers. Those of you who agree to this statement, shout and raise your hands. Pacifism is for losers, for the motion. That's not going to get you very far. Pacifism is for losers, for the motion. A minority right now. So those against the motion, those who do not think pacifism is for losers, shout and raise your hands. You have the debate cut out for you. Ladies and gentlemen, over to you, Vir.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome back. At least I've been doing this for the last 4 years, and it's always wonderful to see such an engaged crowd. Of course, you'll all have a chance to participate, but let's get going. Sanjoy always says, and the staff says, the note that's given is that Vir Sanghvi will set the issue in perspective. Well, actually, how much perspective do you need? One side of the House believes that pacifism is not a successful strategy, it's for losers. The other side believes, maybe, it's time to give war a chance. Well, you'll hear from both sides, and I'm not going to bore you by giving you my views before that. So let's go ahead. And proposing the motion, can I request Mukulika Banerjee?
Good evening, everyone. The majority of you have clearly read the motion slightly incorrectly, all of you who are shouting against it. It's a common mistake. In the land of Gandhi, in the land of India, we think pacifism is a good thing because we associate it in that very imperfect English translation to mean non-violent civil disobedience. These are words in English. They don't capture the spirit of that ideology, which is satyagraha. It's not pacifism. So for those of you who've shouted very loudly against the motion, first thing to say is, can I persuade you to rethink that? Pacifism is for losers because civil disobedience is a different thing altogether. Thinking about civil disobedience, we know about civil disobedience in this country. We've had solidarities with Martin Luther King, with Nelson Mandela, with Václav Havel, and of course Gandhi, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, in the Indian subcontinent. That politics is about courage. It is about the strength of your convictions. It's about seeing the truth. It is about appealing to the honor in the enemy. That's not pacifism, that is civil disobedience. Civil disobedience knows how to assess the enemy. And you can use civil disobedience in a context in which the enemy has a sense of honor, a sense of justice, a sense of truth, and you appeal to their moral core to see the injustice of their actions. If that enemy responds, as they did in the examples I've just cited, then civil disobedience sees a positive outcome. But this is not pacifism. Pacifism, think about the word. It's passive. It is inaction. It is about mollifying the enemy. It is about appeasement. It is compromise. It is placating the enemy. And it is a sign of weakness. And the biggest historical example one can think of here is the British Prime Minister Chamberlain, who was Prime Minister from 1937 to 1940, who believed Hitler in the Munich Agreement, thought he was going to stick to his word and not invade Poland. Guess what happened? So when I say, and guess what happened? You know what happened? The Second World War happened. So this complete lack of ability to read the enemy, the empathy failure, caused loss, not just a loss of face, but the loss of 85 million lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mukulika. Opposing the motion, can I now ask Georgina Godwin to come and speak? Come here.
Violence can bring about change, but it comes at a terrible price. It infects a nation's metabolism with a toxic residue. Violent revolutions often create a messianic leadership, seldom leading to democracy. They tend to launch tyrants, such as happened after the French and Russian revolutions. Violence creates an equivalence of divine right of kings, where those who fought believe that they are now entitled to power indefinitely. And, most commonly, they can then only be removed by an opposition that embraces violence to do so, thus entrenching the circle of violence in a nation's DNA. Pacifism is for the brave, for the patient, for the long term, for the morally tough. What pacifism is not, it is not passive. It can be active and organized. In today's interconnected world, it has all manner of new techniques and opportunities, boycotts and mass rallies, online campaigns. Most of the social changes today are achieved through these non-violent methods. Apartheid was ended through boycotts and sanctions. The Berlin Wall collapsed without a shooting war. And in a world packed with nuclear weapons, pacifism is the only responsible credo. To avoid escalation and the triggering of a destructive world war, we must reject violence. I have personal experience of this. I was born and brought up in Zimbabwe, a country that earned its independence partly through a violent decade of guerrilla struggle in 1980. Our peace did not last long. By 1983, our new leaders who led the armed struggle turned to the gun once more. To stifle dissent, they launched a genocide. And since then, Zimbabwe is a democracy in name only. The political opposition have been peacefully struggling for 30 years in my country. In that time, Zimbabwe has slipped into failed statehood. And yet, the opposition have kept faith with Martin Luther King, who said, "We shall overcome because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." They've also kept faith with Cesar Chavez, who said, "Nonviolence is not inaction. It is not discussion. It is not for the timid or the weak. Nonviolence is hard work."
Sorry, can you hear me? I'm never sure with these mics. You can? If you can, say it. All right, great. All right. Let's go back for proposing the motion. May I now invite Ambassador Manpreet Vohra to come speak?
Well, thank you. You see, that's where the problem comes. I fail to understand what pacifists even mean by pacifism. I mean, does violence create tyrants, or do tyrants perpetrate violence? So the causation and effect perhaps itself is unclear to the pacifists. देखिए, pacifism का मतलब है कि युद्ध सदैव अनुचित है और कभी उसमें भाग नहीं लेना चाहिए. The meaning of pacifism is that war is always wrong and no one should ever take part in it. But let's get real, guys. This is not an ideal world. Everyone does not behave rationally or logically. There is no one common understanding even of fundamental precepts of God, prophets, ancient texts, holy books, religion, religiosity, nationalism, borders, gender equality, individual liberties, human rights. There's just no single common understanding. Now, it would be awesome if you could all just celebrate these differences and divergences, sit around, light up your peace pipes and, talk about it over music and poetry and, the wisdom of the books at the Jaipur Literature Festival. But belief in pacifism implies that even the most violent madmen, terrorist groups, and oppressive regimes are somehow transient or aberrations at best, and they'll eventually listen to reason. That they will accept that they were wrong, that they would change their ways, they would cut a deal with us, they'll stop their wars and their oppression. And while they reach somehow this utopian metamorphosis, we must be patient and we must suffer their war on us. Now, I've served in conflict zones where all this has been tried and it's failed, sadly, repeatedly failed for years. So I asked the pacifists, how long should the women of Afghanistan wait for the present regime to accept that they are even human beings? Must we not fight against terrorists and terrorist states who continue with their violent agendas, who don't listen to offers of peace or pleas of peace, who refuse to talk and negotiate in a civil manner? I mean, has pacifism ever succeeded? There may be a few sterling examples if you stretch the definition, but only exceptions at best. Can anyone really argue that no other methods must be employed? Does the poor conduct of war by generals and politicians, such as by NATO in Afghanistan, means that the war itself was uncalled for, was unjust? I mean, how can anyone argue that bad people must be given as much time as they need to change and they must be never held accountable? How can we forget our history of the Second World War? How far back in history do we want to go? I mean, should our heroes of the Ramayana and Mahabharata have acted differently and not waged war? Wasn't it essential at that time? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. May I now request Gideon Levy to speak against the motion?
My argument will be phrased in the best way, obviously, by Mahatma Gandhi, who said once that non-violence is the weapon of the strong one. Unfortunately or fortunately, I represent here a state which is the strong one. And this state refuses to realize that this weapon belongs to us, Israelis, who are the strong one. Israel still believes, after so many years and so many wars, that living on the sword is the only way for exist. Ask any Israeli and he will tell you that if we don't live on our sword, we will stop existing. But experience and history taught us that not a single war in the history of Israel brought any achievement, but any achievement to Israel. The most victorious war of Israel, 1967, winning against 3 Arab armies within 6 days, totally destroying them, a real miraculous victory, turned out to the biggest curse of the history of Israel, because Israel then was born as an occupier. Israel then was born as an apartheid state on its way. In Israel, you need so much more courage to be in favor of peace rather to support war. Every war which starts in Israel gains almost wall-to-wall support. Everyone supports every war at its beginning. Many times later on, there are some second thoughts, not in this war, by the way, and it repeats itself in a real despairing way, how we always get united over a war and always get totally fragmentized over any kind of peace. Try to suppose any version of a peace plan in Israel and you will be accused either as a treason, as a traitor, or as a loser. But the real losers are those who take us from war to war. And to sum up, I want to get back to Mahatma Gandhi, because he said that non-violence is the weapon of the strong ones. Unfortunately, the Palestinians are the weak ones. And if they will not struggle in violence, unfortunately so, they will be forgotten forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Gideon. That was a really powerful speech. Can I ask the last speaker to propose the motion, Yaroslav Trofimov, if I've got that right? Yes, yes, I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the word pacifism comes from the word peace and a desire for peace. But the alternative to peace, to war very often, unfortunately, is not peace. The alternative to war for many is physical annihilation, destruction of the countries, loss of independence. This is what we are seeing now in Ukraine, where Russia is trying to, which is the country where I was born, where Russia is trying to destroy Ukraine as a nation, as a people, as a culture. That's what we have seen throughout human history. Our planet is littered with the remains of peoples who were physically annihilated, whose histories ended. And so pacifism, as some of my fellow debaters have said, can work in some circumstances, as long as the people oppressing you can be shamed, as long as the argument of shame works. That worked for South Africa, where the international community and many white South Africans could be persuaded of the wrong path on which they had embarked. But there are also cases where nothing but physical resistance can stop a genocide, can stop the gravest crimes against humanity. And in those circumstances, pacifism is actually a weapon that enables the killing. When people now are saying, why don't you stop providing weapons to Ukraine, for example, so the war will end. What they're effectively saying is that why don't we allow the Russian empire to win in their colonial venture and to wipe out Ukraine as a country, which is the stated goal. And if you look at, at the history of this particular conflict, Ukraine received its independence without a single drop of blood being shed. At its inception, it surrendered the nuclear weapons that were in its possession, the missiles that could deliver them, and the strategic bomber aircraft to Russia as part of an internationally guaranteed deal under which Russia agreed to preserve the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Today, Ukrainian cities are being bombed with the very same aircraft and same missiles that Ukraine had given to Russia. And its lack of Russia's ability to use nuclear threats is being used to throttle international support. So unfortunately, we're living in an age now, once again, where international norms, international law are becoming less and less relevant. It's a law of the jungle once again. And is in this sort of dog-eat-dog world, failing to resist very often can bring death to a nation, to a people, and that's why pacifism would not work. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the first part of our debate, but don't worry, there are many parts. Oh my God, sorry. Salil, I'm so sorry. My oldest friend on the panel, and I forget you. Sorry. Opposing the motion, Salil Tripathi.
This is what a Gujarati does to another Gujarati. I want you to take us back to Dandi, where an old man, a Gujarati, is walking with a stick, and 79 people at the beginning, walking to the coast, picking up a bit of salt, and tries to sink an empire in it. Mukulika, who spoke very eloquently about civil disobedience, will say that's civil disobedience. But I want to then take you to Dharasana after that. Because in Dharasana, you had Gujaratis, Punjabis, Marathis, and others who went to the salt factory and kept walking. Many of you have seen the Attenborough film, right? And they kept walking, and the soldiers came and they kept beating them. And the women from the Congress Seva Dal came and nursed them. And as Martin Sheen said while he cried, that Western civilization at that point lost its moral authority. And that was pacifism. That was non-violence. That was courage. That was not cowardice. And that was not for losers. Let's get that right. We have talked about war a little while ago. Let me take you back 2,500 years ago. Samrat Ashok, in this country, fights a war in Kalinga, defeats the empire. He's victorious. He's supremely popular. He has won everything. He sees what does he see around him? Dead bodies strewn everywhere. And he knows that he has won. And he knows the hollowness of that victory. He knows that this is not what he wanted. This is the kind of thing that the sensible Israelis are now feeling with what they've done in Gaza. This is the kind of thing that probably the smart Germans realized with what they had done in Germany in 1945. That's violence. That's what it does to you. And what does Ashok become? He becomes a monk. He becomes a Buddhist. He puts up stupas. He puts up these wonderful monuments everywhere, where he talks about animal rights way before Hammurabi, way before Magna Carta. Magna Carta was a tract and a pact between rich, elite, aristocratic British who wanted to sign a deal so that the king, John, would not tax them to fight wars. This is way beyond that. It's not about wars. It's not about that. It's much, much more important than that. It's about stopping war, because those who can only use a stone have already lost the argument. Those who say, let a man who has a spade call a spade, as Oscar Wilde said, they should be asked to use one and start digging their own grave. So pacifism is way too important, and it's about pacific and not being passive.
Thank you, Salil. And to think I nearly missed you. Thanks so much. To think I nearly missed calling you. Sorry. Okay, so I jumped the gun slightly, but we are finally through with this round. We now have another round of rebuttals, and I think we'll do it in the same order. So Mukulika, do you want to start rebutting?
Well, I'm sorry, my job is slightly predictable. I warned you as the audience what was going to happen, and that's exactly what's happened. We have interpreted pacifism as nonviolent civil disobedience. I should know, I wrote a book about the longest Gandhian movement, which was by the Pashtuns, a Muslim martial race that chose nonviolent civil disobedience and saw Indian independence. They were also led down by the Congress and made part of Pakistan. I know this story. I agree that civil disobedience has its own power, but there is a moment when you choose it, you estimate it. My problem with this proposition is that we are using this word pacifism to describe, on the one hand, as I did, Chamberlain, on the other hand, Gandhi. To put Gandhi in the same category as the British Prime Minister who was Prime Minister at the same time that Gandhi was fighting for independence and being very successful in persuading people that the moral authority of civil disobedience was going to win them independence, was in fact that British Prime Minister was the pacifist. He was taken in by Hitler, he believed him, there was a great fascination for the strong man. He thought the Munich Agreement would hold. He comes back, Hitler says, that was just a piece of paper, that means nothing. What happens? There is mass destruction. The world hasn't seen war at that level. To put Gandhi in that category is a complete travesty. Chamberlain was the loser, not Gandhi. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Against the motion, Georgina.
Thank you. Of course, fascination with the strong man is once back amongst us. And although that kind of violence can often bring change faster, it has a much worse track record of producing fair, peaceable, stable societies. We have to look at what happens after violence. In history, what tends to happen once one's been seduced by the quick fix of violence, it's very, very difficult to resist repetition when confronted by a peaceful opposition. Machiavelli warned, wars begin when you will, but they do not end when you please. Sometimes people think there's nothing one can do as an individual, but when individuals combine, our force is mighty. I am absolutely not advocating sitting back and doing nothing, though I know that it's enormously tempting to do so. We all just want to get on with our lives, we want to earn a crust, we want to provide for our families. But I believe that it's down to each one of us to make this a better, more peaceful world. It's down to you, and you, and you, and you, and all of you, and all of you. The geopolitical situation right now is absolutely dire, but as Joan Baez said, and apologies if you were born after 1970, this will mean nothing to you, action is the antidote to despair. And John Lennon told us, if everybody demanded peace instead of another TV set, then there would be peace. I issue a call to each of us to take Edmund Burke's words to heart. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men, and that means all of us, to do nothing.
Thank you so much, Georgina. Ambassador Vohra, your turn.
Thank you. You know, Gandhiji is not around with us, and I'm actually not quite sure if he'll agree with this labeling, our labeling of him as a pacifist, the way the word is understood today. And it certainly is a very incomplete understanding of history and events if we say that his contribution, laudable and huge as it was the only reason that India got independence. As if the war itself had nothing to do with India getting independent, and subsequently so many other countries. I mean, that is really laughable. Martin Luther King, yes, you know, he got what he got in the United States. But are we saying that nobody else fought for those and had no contribution in that ultimate denouement that happened over there? Like I said, has pacifism ever really succeeded by itself? Few sterling examples, but no. And how long can we wait? Shall we give up trying altogether? I spoke about Afghanistan and the women there. Shall we give up altogether, the 20 million of them, just because pacifists would have us do nothing more other than wait? That can't be. We cannot argue that bad people cannot be held accountable. I spoke about the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. What would have been the evolution of the human condition, certainly of our Indian philosophy and our ethos, if those epics had been differently? Our gods and goddesses take demonic forms periodically to come and rid the world of tyrants in other ways other than pacifist means. That's how it is. There are times and situations, therefore, clearly, when waging war may well be the only option. And shying away from that uncomfortable decision and hoping for some magical, peaceful solution to emerge by itself is a fanciful dream. Noble as an idea, but irrelevant, ineffective, and impractical. Turning the other cheek cannot be a strategy. So, as I said, get real, guys. Pacifism is escapism, it is inaction, and it is certainly for losers.
Thank you, Ambassador. Gideon, would you like to do your rebuttals?
Sanjoy, Namita, William, will you ever invite me again? I'm not used to such support. I'm really not used to it. When I was first asked about this motion, I said pacifism is for dreamers. But I didn't mean to criticize it. How much we need dreamers. How much we had enough with realistic politicians and generals. The main question that I can put here at stake is, which is being asked in Israel, what would have happened if after the vicious attack of the 7th of October, Israel wouldn't retaliate? In Israel, if you raise this question, you are obviously a traitor and a loser. But when I look backwards 15 months a year later, what did Israel gain out of this mass killing? What did it gain? Is it a more secure place to live in? No. Is it a more moral place? No. Does it have more perspective for the future? No. And above all, the spirit of the Israelis changed so dramatically because of the war. It's not a question only of the right of Israel to defend itself, no doubt about it. But is the military massive punishment of Gaza serving Israel, serving anyone? 50,000 people killed. What does this serve exactly? What does the destruction serve? How can we say that preventing it is being a loser? As a loser is this one who launches such a war just for the sake of war, just for the sake of bloodshed, just for the sake of revenge and punishment, and just for the sake to show domestically how strong he is. He is the real loser.
Thank you, Gideon. Yaroslav, you want to do your rebuttals?
I will open in a Pacific spirit and say that I actually agree with quite a few of the things that were said. I agree that peaceful change is much preferable to violent revolutions. But sometimes it's impossible. I agree that pacifism is the weapon of the strong. Unfortunately, very many people facing adversity are not strong. And yes, John Lennon said what he said, but it's one thing if you are fighting against the United States in the 1970s, which was a democratic society where John Lennon could become a pop idol doing that. It's a very different thing if your enemy is Russia, Putin's Russia, where a child can be separated from her parents just for drawing a dove and saying yes to peace in her high school. Sometimes, unfortunately, there is no other option. And we have seen it throughout human history, and we are seeing it again. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final rebuttal. Salil, this time I've remembered. Sweet.
Thank you. I'm so glad that Mukulika brought up Khudai Khidmatgars, about whom she knows a lot more than I do, and so does the ambassador. And I just want to remind that it is possible, even in the most brutal landscapes, to speak about peace with courage. The trouble with these debates is that you get ascribed positions that you never hold. And therefore, we are somehow made to feel that we are supporting Chamberlain when we did not. So who on earth said that when Chamberlain said that peace in our times is something we believe in? No. It's Milosevic versus Rugova, if I were to go back to the Yugoslav war, right? You have Milosevic who comes in the Ghazi Maidan statement and makes a statement saying that nobody will ever humiliate you, and Ibrahim Rugova in Kosovo, in the independent republic, fighting against it and speaking about peace and winning. And Milosevic then goes to The Hague, gets tried, and possibly took his own life before he was going to be sentenced, whereas Rugova did die a natural death and in peace. And that's how it happens. Today we know a lot more about Churchill, and we know about what he did with the concentration camps in South Africa, his role in the Middle East, and of course in the Bengal famine. But who is the winner? Is it Churchill or Gandhi in the end? And I think so we have to think about people who are winning and who are losing, who's fighting wars and not. And just to build on what my good friend Gideon just said, that, how did India respond after 2008 when Pakistani terrorists did attack my hometown, Bombay? How did the government react? And what is the consequence of that? Regardless of, yes, not a shot was fired, but is Pakistan today a pariah state? Or is it the toast of the world? And is India the toast of the world or the pariah state? Think about that. There is a logic in not fighting.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're now supposed to have a discussion between the panelists, and I'm supposed to state to you roughly what the positions are. Now, if people who set debate motions always set absolute motions. And if you go with an absolute motion and you say, and also in this case they've done a negative, which is even more confusing, which is people who are proposing the motion are actually not anti-pacifism, and this side is pro-pacifism. That's not always been clear in the speeches, I'm afraid. But when you talk about pacifism, what are you talking about? I imagine that the people who wrote it said pacifism for losers, suggesting that if you were a pacifist of any kind, you were a loser, somebody who was going to get nowhere. Now, the only way you can stand up for pacifism in today's world is by not defining it absolutely. If you say that nonviolence is the only answer to every situation, then you have a problem with, say, Ukraine, which is the example he gave. You have the problem, well, let's look at our own history. In 1971, when Pakistan unleashed a genocide on what was then East Pakistan, is now Bangladesh, India intervened militarily and liberated Bangladesh. Now, were we wrong? Should we have been pacifists? Should we have sat back? I think people who support pacifism will say, yeah, but you were only responding to another war, and it'll go on and on. So these are difficult issues, but what they've tried to do, I think, as much as possible, is define them in a way that you cannot be absolute, but can talk sense. So let's start with the first question. Salil Tripathi. So India is the toast to the world, huh? Doesn't seem like that from your writings.
Well, I mean, we are talking about a debate here, but yes.
Yeah, but you can't say in debate things you don't mean, so you mean that?
No. So, of course, India is a toast of the world in certain respects and certain aspects. But there's a lot that India has to be ashamed about. I was talking to students today at a school here in Jaipur, where I was told that, India is such a prosperous country and GDP. I said, there's 100 billionaires or something like that, but 80% of the people still living on rations given out. Otherwise, they would starve to death. So, yes, there's a lot to be ashamed about in India today, just as there are things to be proud about.
So not quite the toast. All right,
No.
Mukulika, go on.
Yeah.
Just to remind Salil, because he seems to have forgotten what happened after India's pacifist response, he was touted the reason why India is the toast of the world today is because Mr. Modi made it his business. Ghus ke maar ke aayenge. Remember that?
Yeah.
In 2014, in 2019, they went into Pakistan. There was an airstrike. It has never been done before. It is muscling your way to the stage. That is not a pacifist response. India may have had dignity, but if you had to tell your story correctly, Salil, it wasn't India's non-response after Bombay. It was the fact that India took revenge after Pulwama.
Okay, so India is the toast of the world, and that's because Mr. Modi uses military force. Is that your position?
Yes.
Yes. All right, okay, fine. Always interesting to see positions people take in these debates. Ambassador, you said that people who went on about how Gandhi was responsible for Indian independence ignored the role of the war. Would India have got independence? Would any of the colonial states have got independence if it wasn't for the war, you said in your speech? So basically, your theory is that we should thank Hitler for our independence?
No, not at all, not at all. But it did take the war to weaken the British Empire, among other things, and that led to our independence. You know, and there was a need, but that wasn't the objective of the war, to weaken the British Empire. The objective of war was to fight against fascism. Pacifists tried. Neville Chamberlain has been mentioned, etc. They did try. Did that work on Hitler? Now, what should one have done? Suppose the war hadn't happened and Hitler and Nazi fascism had taken over the world or taken over Europe. Would that be a happy situation? And we could wait for another some pacifist huge man to emerge or woman to emerge 100 years later?
Hang on a minute. There are millions of people who believe it would have been a good situation. Netaji would have been a prime minister and all things would have been wonderful.
Well, I cannot say what would have been better or worse, but we certainly do owe our independence, not just to pacifist means of Gandhiji, but also by a whole lot of contributions by a whole lot of others, including men and women in uniform and fighting.
Okay, fair enough. Gideon, I wanted to ask you, you spoke very powerfully about Israel, and you spoke about what this whole business of winning wars, and you gave the example of 67, has actually done, is in many ways changed the notion of Israel from being just a Jewish state to becoming an occupier of other people's territories. So here's my question. I think most people here would agree with a lot of what you said. But what is Israel supposed to do now when, say, Hamas launches an attack? Do you sit back and be pacifistic?
I'm not a pacifist in the way that I think we can dismantle our army, we shouldn't shoot anyone, we should just establish a Salvation Army, because we are living in certain reality, and I think I'm realistic. If you ask me what should have happened, and I want one more sentence, the biggest strategic achievement of Israel ever since it was established, the biggest one, which added to its the defense and security much more than all the wars, was peace with Egypt. No doubt about this. This was the strongest achievement of Israel, giving up the territories, having peace with Egypt, which lasts now ever since 78, and it's not a very warm one, but it exists. Getting to your question. First of all, what did Israel achieve by launching this war? There are other ways. I don't think that Israel should just say, okay, you killed 1,200 Jews, we forgive you, let's go on. No. But it could have been a turning point. For once, I would like to see an Israeli who will stand up after this vicious attack and say, listen, this is unforgivable what you have done, and we will punish those who did it. We will not forget. But we got to such a low place. Let's try and meet and try to talk. Let's try. We never tried it even with Hamas. Yes, with Hamas. Maybe it wouldn't succeed. Let's try to speak about lifting the siege after this horrible attack. Let's offer the Palestinians an open Gaza. Let's try it. We never tried it. How can we know it will fail if we never tried it? Let's tell the people of Gaza that from now on you are free to travel abroad. There will be maybe some supervision, but who supervised the weapons flow to Israel, for God's sake? Who has the right to supervise the weapon flow of an independent country, which Gaza is not, obviously, but we have to aim there. So this attack could be also a promise for a strategic change. Instead of this, we launched another war, much more cruel than the former wars. I can tell you exactly how it will end. We will end exactly in the point that we were on the 6th of October before the attack. I can assure you that as sure as it is that in the next January there will be the Jaipur Literature Festival, I can assure you that within 5 to 7 years there will be another attack of Israel over Gaza, which will be even more brutal than the last one. So why at least not to try an alternative way? And don't tell me it is impossible, but because we never really tried it.
Thank you, thank you. It's not really relevant to the motion, but then nor is a lot of what's been said. So do you think Israel has lost enormously in terms of its sympathy and image in the world because of the reaction?
Israel lost a lot in terms of sympathy, but Israel did not lose the support of most of the governments in the world, including your government, and above all the American government. And as long as this is the case, Israel is military strong. But is being strong military and even economically the only way to judge a strength of a country? I think that the strength of a country, Sweden is not so strong, but everyone knows that Sweden is a moral model. This is the strength of Sweden. Israel could have become, I don't have to remind you here, many Indians for decades admired Israel because of its development, because it was a society of immigrants who came from the ashes and built this technology and this prosper, really, economy, kibbutzim, many beautiful things. This is the power of a country, no less than another brutal war with tens of thousands of victims, people who lost everything in their life. And yes, we are turning into a pariah state, no doubt about it. And this is also part of the strategic strengths of a country. Sure, it's not enough to get from Donald Trump any weapon we want. This is not enough to be a strong country.
Thank you, thank you. Yaroslav, since we're now talking about current affairs, etc., it appears, judging by what Trump has been saying, that he wants some kind of negotiated peace between Russia and Ukraine. Was this an option at the time Russia invaded? Because Putin made out that he had no choice but to invade. So did Ukraine and the rest of the world community miss an opportunity for a negotiated settlement? Or are we just wrong on that?
Not at all, no. I think what preceded the war was President Putin meeting Biden and outlining his plan for dividing Europe again and for pushing NATO out of NATO member states in Eastern Europe. And Ukraine, which Putin planned to take in 3 days, was just the first step in this redrawing revision of the outcome of the Cold War. If you listen to Putin himself speak, like his Tucker Carlson interview, he spent half an hour explaining why Ukraine doesn't really exist. And it's all an invention of the Austro-Hungarian military headquarters in the First World War. So the Russian program is really genocidal in its intent, to wipe out Ukraine as a separate nation, as a language, as a culture. So President Trump wants peace, great. Ukrainians are the first to want peace. But what Russia wants is a surrender, and it wants a disarmed Ukraine
that even if it's not controlled fully right now, will be controlled down the line. And we come back to this whole issue of wars, and not to pass for a warmonger, but there are just and unjust wars. We have to remember that. And even in the just wars, there are just and unjust ways of waging war. And it's very important for Ukraine, which is waging a just defensive war, to wage it in a just way and not to kill Russian civilians, for example. Which is, what is pursuing.
So can I summarize your side's position, though it's sort of very brutal at the moment? Pacifism is for losers. Your attitude is not that you're pro-war or pro-violence. Your only position here is that there are just wars, there's a right to use violence for justice and for self-defense. Is that accurate, or would you disagree with that?
Yes, correct. Yes. I mean, wars, peace is preferable to war, obviously. But sometimes the alternative to war is not peace, it's death.
Yeah. All right. So let me turn to your side now. Are you saying, therefore, pacifism, Gideon is not saying that, but are the rest of you saying pacifism in all circumstances? Or are you saying, let's strive for peace, let's not just believe that military power is the solution to everything, and if peace is not possible and you need something for self-defense, then you don't rule out violence? Are you saying that, or is your position more absolute?
Well, Gandhi did say in 1920 that non-violence does not mean cowardice.
I was actually going to quote exactly that to you, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I beat you to that. You two Gujaratis, so
yeah,
this is what
you know us Gujaratis, maybe one day we'll rule the country and things will change.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Opposition doesn't have to mean violence. Opposition can take many, many forms. And I think that that's what our position is.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to ask you, that if you're, say, in a situation like Ukraine, if you're in a situation like Bangladesh, which was the example I gave, why rule out violence as a response?
So
I agree that peace is much more preferable, but why rule it out? Why take the side of pacifism?
So, since I did write a book on Bangladesh some years ago, self-defense is what the Bangladeshis did. The Mukti Bahini did that. And India was very, very, very wise in not attacking at any point until foolishly Pakistan decided to invade and attack 9 Indian airfields on the 1st of December 1971.
Trying to imitate Israel in 67.
Yeah, and it was a stupid idea that Yahya Khan did, and that gave India the casus belli, as the laws of war would put it, and gave India the rationale to intervene, and it took 2 weeks after that. But we must remember it was a 9-month war, started on 25th of March with Operation Searchlight, and there were a lot of Bangladeshis who initially did try to fight in a passive way, and they took up the weapons when they had no other choice. So yes, in principle, in self-defense, there may be time, and Gandhi would also probably agree with that there are times when you have to pick up the weapon, but it should never be the first resort, and it should never be done in anger over trying to assert a position of power, because the issue is not about power, the issue is about justice.
That's brilliant, but that's exactly their view as well.
Exactly
So where do you guys disagree? You just summarized their case. Why are you on this side?
No, I think they are on our side. I think because, when
Mukulika, you are
when Mukulika started describing civil disobedience, I thought she was in the wrong team.
Hang on, before we go further, Georgina, I want to talk to you about not just Zimbabwe, but the experience of South Africa. Everybody talks about Gandhiji and Martin Luther King, but we forget that our most recent example perhaps was Mandela and South Africa. Why do you think his legacy has not been maintained the way it should have been? Certainly not in Zimbabwe, which is the neighboring state, and perhaps not in South Africa now.
I mean, I think that there is a huge amount of support for his legacy, a lot of people who pay lip service to it, certainly. But South Africa, like Zimbabwe, is falling victim to being a kleptocracy. And I think that this is often what happens. The ANC is a very powerful party, but it's losing support at the moment. And when people are in charge, and they've been in charge since the beginning, since the very first election, after Mandela came out, the ANC has been in charge. People get used to that. People need to feed from that trough. there is a lot of poverty in both South Africa and in Zimbabwe. And one way of maintaining your lifestyle is to be there, to be in that position where you are an MP, you can then afford to get whatever it is that you need for your family. In Zimbabwe, when I was talking about sort of taking personal responsibility for things, it doesn't mean you have to be brave. I started this radio station and we were shut down, and we were in a situation where we needed to move some equipment out of a place that was guarded by the police. I asked all my fearless fighter for freedom and democracy people to come and help me. None of them would. They said it was too dangerous. I took my Baby and Me yoga group in with me. We took our prams. And when we came out, all the equipment was under the babies in the prams. Now, these were women that I had perhaps slightly despised. They didn't have jobs. They weren't journalists. They weren't fighting for anything. But those women were braver than anybody else who paid lip service to it and said that they were actually there for the fight.
Well, not necessarily braver than you, because you had a lot to lose and you still did it. Yeah?
Well, and I never went home again. I'm an enemy of the state.
That's the price you paid, yeah. All right, so basically you guys are on the same side. We've established that. Not a lot of room for disagreement. Let's now ask the audience. All right, any questions? Okay, this is somebody in the microphone. This is various people in the first row with their hands up. You judge who you want to give the mic to. When you get up, you identify yourself. You say if your question is directed at somebody. If it's not directed at somebody, you make it clear it's a general question. And if it's not a question and it's a speech, then you sit down and pass the mic to somebody else. All right?
So my name is Nidhish Goyal. My question is to one Gujarati and one ambassador, to Salil and Manpreet Vohra ji. Sir, do you see any differences between the four big guns of Indian? First is Vir Savarkar. He discussed not yet. And then Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Gandhi, and the Modi ji, because they all talked about peace, prosperity, and we are in the state of Rajasthan, where we talk about Maharana Pratap, that Dwand kahan tak pala jaye, Yudh kahan tak tala jaye. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Savarkar spoke about peace. All right, okay. Does anyone want to answer that?
I think, sorry, you're going first? Yeah, go on.
Yeah.
Well, you know, every individual is different, and so were the four people that you named. Their contexts were different, their own ideas were different, and they had their own approach to various issues of society and polity. So it's very hard to compare, certainly for me. One with the other. And
well, it's easy to tell you were a diplomat.
Yeah, well, it doesn't serve any purpose.
Since I'm not, I will button, yeah.
Yeah. No, let him answer. Please, Ambassador, finish.
I mean, it doesn't really serve any purpose. I mean, the point that my side is making is that there is a just war. There is a time when war is needed. It is required. The point that the other side is making is perhaps it's never required. And the example of a very unjust war, like the one currently going on in Israel and Gaza, I mean, that's belittling the larger idea behind this proposition before us today, that pacifism is for losers. Because, you cannot be pacifist, you cannot be inactive. It takes two to tango. You cannot have, all good people are human beings.
All this is true, but you're not answering his question
No,
at all.
I am.
Yeah.
All good people are human beings, but all human beings are not good people. So you need somehow different approaches at different times, at different contexts, and war is certainly required justly at times.
Okay, all right. Somebody else with a question? Who's got the microphone? Can you?
There's a young girl in the front row.
Okay.
Hello, sir. Hello, everyone. So my question is basically for the majority in this. Pacifism is for losers. Okay, let's say pacifism is for losers, but the losers are the one who win back again. Losers get the chance to win back. Losers are the one who get the chance to improve. So I don't understand, like those who are in violence, they don't have that much of name in history as much as compared to Gandhi. He has got a name like all over the world. Many of the people know Gandhi as compared to all those violent people. So I don't so what I need is like Can you please explain what make you think that pacifism is for losers when losers start the game yet again and win?
That's a very good question. Thank you.
I'm so glad we picked you out. Thank
Yeah.
you for your question. All we are saying is that there are some enemies who don't have the honor, that don't have the sense of justice, who don't have the sense of shame when civil disobedience is used against them. You can use civil disobedience, non-violence, against people who feel ashamed to fire on unarmed people. If they don't have a conscience, and we've talked about Hitler, we've talked about Putin, we've talked about Israel, we've talked about examples in which if you say, look, we are appealing to your good side when there isn't a good side, and say, no, he said he's going to stop fighting, he's not going to invade, let's just believe it, because you don't have the courage to make the difficult decision to wage a war, then you are a loser because you're trusting the wrong person. This is something I've learned from Gandhi. Thank you.
Okay. Before we go further, I have somebody here in the audience who I think has a legitimate right to make a comment. I have Gopal Gandhiji, one of our most distinguished civil servants and public figures, and of course, related to you-know-who.
How many seconds? Thank you very much. I'm an intruder in this stage, but I just want to compliment every single speaker on the sharpness of the argument, the subtlety of the thought, and the absolute objectivity of their thinking. But I have this to say, that there is one speaker on this stage who is not on this stage. It says something of a man who has been dead 77 years, that he is being spoken of and discussed by every single speaker as if he is a counter to Trump, to Putin, to Hamas, to every single player in the stage today. But that is only to say that he was a trained, non-combatant soldier twice in South Africa. Once in the Boer War and once in what was called the suppression of the Zulu rebellion. He was in uniform, and he was proud to be in uniform, though as a non-combatant. Why? Because he believed that there was some point in being on that stage in the theater of the war. What he was against was not war as such, but the hatred and the spite and the gratuitous violence that goes into war. I must say here, he fully supported India's armed resistance of the invasion of Kashmir. He supported it to the hilt. I do not know what he would have said in 71, but this I know, that he was not against the use of war as such, or the use of armed resistance as such. He was against gratuitous violence and the impulse of hate and spite and the callous murder and massacre of innocents that goes into war. Ask the mothers and the wives of those killed. Ask the soldiers who have been killed. But finally, let me say this with complete confidence, that he would have opposed nuclear weaponization and the manufacture of weapons of mass destruction by any state, at any cost, at any time. And this is because he would have been perfectly ready to offer himself as a satyagrahi against nuclear weaponization or against the use of any instrument of mass destruction which would have meant the annihilation of huge chunks of the population of this earth. Gandhi was not against force, he was against the misapplication of force and the propulsion behind the force that we see today. He was not going to win or lose this debate. He was just there as an invisible presence 77 years after he has died.
Thank you, Gopal Gandhi. Probably the wisest words we've heard this evening. All right, somebody else wants to come in from the audience? Who's got the microphone? Okay, choose somebody. You can probably see them. Yeah, don't keep choosing from the first row. Yeah. At three, let's go. Let him ask his question, but after that, let's go deep into the
Mukulika ma'am, actually, I am asking question on present scenario. Former President Joe Biden, in time Joe Biden, there is so many war in world, but Trump come and all Putin also discussion we are ready for peace. So who is more violent, Trump or Biden?
All right, okay. Will you, for future, will you just go into the audience rather than keeping on asking people in the first row? Mukulika, you want to answer?
Neither.
Okay. Expand.
Trump has not offered a solution for the Palestinian people. Trump has managed to, we will see what happens, but he hasn't stopped the genocide. I hold Biden culpable, yes, of course, but Trump is not offering a solution for the Palestinian people. By the time Trump has got elected, the West Bank has been settled by Israeli settlers. So to talk about Trump bringing peace is completely to misread the situation.
All right, okay, fair enough. Somebody else? Okay, whoever has the microphone,
hi,
please answer.
My question is like to all the panelists. We saw the arms race happen during the Cold War, nuclear nations being built out of that, and through that, something interesting coming out with the concept of the logic of deterrence, which perhaps in a metaphorical sense would mean that if there are two strong individuals facing each other, they won't fight each other because they both can cause harm to each other. And that in many ways perhaps achieves the objectives of pacifism more than the practice of pacifism does. What are your views on that?
Okay, I want a quick answer from, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic. So what happened after the Cold War was this idea of international law and international guarantees that protected the smaller nations, which partially was a result why there wasn't very limited nuclear proliferation around the world because nations didn't feel like they needed it. What we're seeing now with this collapse of international law and the return to this system of empires and stronger nations bullying the weaker ones, we are probably going to see once again a nuclear arms race because countries are realizing that they cannot trust their allies and that the only guarantee of security for many of them would be to seek a nuclear deterrent. And that is a very dangerous development if we're going to have dozens of nuclear states 10 years from now.
Yeah,
I think you're assuming that you've got sensible people in charge. But here you're talking about Donald Trump versus Vladimir Putin.
There you are. All right. Okay. Somebody else? Who's got the microphone?
Mukulika said the woman on the left.
Yeah, but I have to get her a microphone, right? So.
Yeah. No. To the woman in the front, yes. Yeah. Anyway.
Hi, thank you so much. I think that a lot of the reason a lot of people oppose pacifism is because they believe that it's a inactive stance to take. And so my question to the panel that is in favor of pacifism is, could you please give some examples that you believe are really strong resistance examples for why pacifism does work and how it isn't inactive as a stance?
You
I
mean
hope that makes sense.
countries other than the one you're standing in, which is the best example, right?
Well, apartheid, South Africa.
Yes, I know she's talked about it, but we've got apartheid, we've got South Africa, we've got India, you've got
I spoke about Kosovo.
Kosovo. Explain it.
I was
Iceland, Vanuatu,
yeah,
Norway.
So many. I was wondering if they could be examples such as, boycotts and actual. Does that make sense? Like not just places that have done it, but the ways in which they've performed pacifism successfully.
Okay, thanks. I think you have to give the microphone back now. But absolutely right about the boycott. I don't think South Africa would have collapsed the way it did without boycotts and sanctions. Do you?
Absolutely not. It was absolutely crucial to it.
All right. Okay, there was somebody, Mukula, who was that? You were saying a woman where you want? Just behind her. Okay. Can we get the microphone?
There's another woman right on your right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make this very quick.
Good, because we're out of time.
Yeah, I just want to know that do the governments prefer the anti-pacifist approach and name the other country as the enemy only to deflect from the structural issues that is in its own country? Does it happen?
This is like a rhetorical question, right? But okay, Mukulika, answer that.
Yes, we are talking about very different times. At the moment, creating an enemy who you can direct everybody's hate to distract from the fact that there is rising social inequality and people are not doing so well, has become a classic trope from the United States to India. You're absolutely right. All of Europe, yes.
All right, okay, I think we're out of time. They're about to start playing the drums, so we'll now get on with the next part of it, which is, can we have the closing statements? Can we start with Mukulika?
Honestly, I don't think I have very much more to add. Once Gopal Gandhi has spoken, I think there is a level of nuance to our discussion, debate and antagonism aside and winning and losing aside. This is a serious issue of our times. And Gopal Gandhi is absolutely right that I certainly, and the panel, still look to Gandhi to think about what is the right response. When I have been on every single demonstration in central London for the last 12 months and more, protesting against the genocide in Gaza, in my non-violent protest, and felt completely powerless, apart from the fact that I have been able to express my opinion in a democratic society like the United Kingdom, I have not been effectual. And I have thought of Gandhi every single day. What does one do when the enemy on the other side simply has no sense of justice, no sense of dignity, and is full of the hatred that Gandhi, in fact, as Gopalji has just reminded us, was so against? So if it really is about not being against force, but forced back by hatred, then we can think about that age-old question. It's in the Gita. That's what Krishna is telling Arjun. You must do your dharma and fight for what is right. It is the eternal question. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Can we now go across the aisle? Georgina, closing statement.
Thank you, Jaipur. I've had the most incredible time here. I've also done some great shopping. I bought a lot of jewelry. But as you can see, this one ring doesn't match with the rest of my jewelry. And that's because it belonged to my sister. Jane Godwin was her name. She was killed by the Rhodesian army in 1978. She, along with millions and millions of others all around the world. And to end, I would like to give you some figures. Unfortunately, I don't know many individual names, but to the best of my knowledge, these are the numbers of people who died as a result of armed conflict in 2024 alone. These are people who were loved, who are missed, who could have been someone dear to you. Myanmar, 19,715. Arab-Israeli conflict in 2024 alone, 30,386. The Sahel, 20,667. Sudan, 16,575. Russia, Ukraine, 77,633. Afghanistan, 3,208. Somalia, 6,206. Syria, and remember this is only 2024, 6,887. Various insurgencies here in India, 850 in 2024, and in 2025 so far, 45 people. So I ask you, please, to ask yourselves, is it ever worth it? Please take a little bit of time to think about those people we have lost and to think about how we can peacefully stop the perpetuation of this senseless killing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Ambassador, it's your turn.
Well, thank you. Those were very grim and sad figures that Georgina just gave us. But what about the 20 million women of Afghanistan who today live buried alive? I mean, don't somebody need to step forward to do something for them? Can we simply wait with our pacifist approach, believing in the good heart of the Taliban and that they might change sometime? Does not war or some other methods required? And war, why are we confusing war today in 2025 with massive carpet bombing and collateral damage? It doesn't have to be that way. There are smart ways to win wars today. There are non-kinetic ways to win war today. If one was to agree with President Trump, and these are early days, I mean, there seems to be just phone calls and pressures and threat of sanctions that seem to be working to change the other side, what has seemed to be completely intractable, unchangeable. So there are other ways to do it, but we cannot say that we will not use any hard-arm, strong-arm tactic, never mind the condition of millions and millions of people. Women, girls, for example, in Afghanistan. We cannot have that attitude. It is almost buried in the head buried in the sand kind of attitude. We cannot. I said a few minutes ago, all good people are human beings, but all human beings are not good people. Unfortunately, that is the reality. There are illogical, unreasonable people who will only say my way or the highway, who will not listen to you. And meanwhile, millions suffer. So what do we do? Do the pacifists say, hey, listen, it's too bad, but let's just wait? And meanwhile, what happens? Generations upon generations of girls, women, children have not seen anything except violence. Looking at Africa, Afghanistan, for example, that needs to change. And if it requires prosecution of a war effort, smartly done, rightly done, that is the right way to do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Gideon, closing remarks.
I would like to dedicate my closing remarks to the struggle of the Palestinian people. I don't know a more just struggle than the struggle of the Palestinian people today. The international law legitimizes armed struggle against occupation. But where did it bring them? On one hand, it was their only reminder for the world, for the Arab world, that they exist under terrible conditions. But in the same time, it did lead them to nowhere. I am a truly and long-time believer in many other ways of struggle. I don't believe in peaceful marches as they tried. The Palestinians tried it all and failed it all. Peaceful marches toward the border, peaceful marches toward the soldiers ended always up with terrible bloodshed, like we saw in the years of the demonstrations over the fence with Gaza. But tools like a boycott, tools like pushing pressure on Israel, tools like making Israel accountable, tools like bringing Israel to court, tools like making Israelis be punished for the crimes and pay for the crimes are non-violent tools, and you'll be surprised how efficient they will be, exactly like with apartheid South Africa. That's my modest suggestion to the Palestinians. Go for an international struggle which will lead Israel to pay for its crimes.
Thank you. Yaroslav, closing remarks?
I think sort of one conclusion I have from this discussion is that we have to make the distinction between the reality and the aspiration. And we all in this hall and most people in the world want peace, abhor war, and abhor death and the destruction the war brings. Unfortunately, I think there is a realization now increasingly that we are living at the end of the bracket, a historical bracket that began in 1945. When the UN was created, the principle, a very novel principle, you're not supposed to invade another country or threaten it with invasion, became part of the statute of the United Nations. And after the end of the Cold War, the entire idea of international justice, International Criminal Court, it became sort of currency of international relations more and more accepted. All this seems to be vanishing now as wars of aggression, wars of conquest are now a common behavior, not just in Russia, but we're also seeing President Trump threatening to annex Greenland, slapping sanctions on Canada and inviting it to become the 51st state. And I was thinking about this as I was rereading a classical text about the Peloponnesian War, the dialogue of the Athenians and the Melians, where the Athenians came to Melos and said, surrender because we are stronger. And the Melians said, well, it's unjust. Why would we surrender to you? We are neutral. And the Athenians say, well, there is no justice in international relations. And the weak must, the strong do as they must, and the weak suffer as they have. Well, strong do as they will, and the weak suffer as they must. And unfortunately, we are now in that situation again. And the weak have to become strong unless they want to disappear. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Our final speaker of the day, Salil, one Gujarati has already said very high standard, so you have to live up to that for Gujarat's sake.
I'll do my best. In 1968, Martin Luther King was killed. And the Chicago Sun-Times had this wonderful cartoon where Martin Luther King goes to heaven and meets Gandhi. And Gandhi tells him, the odd things about assassins, Dr. King, is that they think they've killed you. And we need to bear it in mind, because the very fact that all of us felt the need to invoke his name and not in vain is important. The gentleman here wanted me, in the blue shirt, wanted me to react to the 4 names he mentioned, Savarkar, Bose, Gandhi, and Modi. And you know where I stand. The only one thing I can say is that Gandhi is the only one among the 4 who never worshipped weapons. 2 final things before I end. One, again, I have to quote Gandhi. We can't go away from it, you know. He's an annoying presence in the Gujarati mind. He keeps telling us what we could be, what we should be, and what we are failing at day after day. So since I've written a book on Gujaratis, I have to bring him in here again. And this is what he said. Remember that all through history, there have been tyrants and murderers. And for a time, they seem invincible. But in the end, they always fall. Remember? Always. Does it sound childish, naive, and optimistic? Let me go back to the Gandhian leader I have known in my time, Václav Havel, who I knew him a little bit, Václav Havel of Czech Republic. And this is what he said, and this is what I want us to look forward to as we go forward. Hope is definitely not the same thing as optimism. It is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but that certainty that something makes sense regardless of how it turns out. I think Gandhi would have agreed. I think Gopal Bhai would have agreed. Thank you.
Thank you, Salil. I think that's it from our panelists. If Sanjoy comes up now, aren't you going to? No, you can do the vote. I actually have said my bit, which is essentially that both sides are saying exactly the same thing, which is they don't believe in violence, they don't believe war is a preferred option, they believe eventually it's only peace that will prevail, but sometimes if war is forced on you, you fight it. I think that's pretty much what both sides have said, but they'll find a different way of voting. So go ahead.
It is a complicated proposition, but I'm going to have to put it to vote. At any rate, thank you all for making these arguments and making them so particularly complicated and shades of gray. So ladies and gentlemen, the motion today is pacifism is for losers. Those of you in agreement with the motion, please shout and wave your hands. Pacifism is for losers. Those of you who are against the motion, pacifism is for losers, please raise your hands and shout. The House carries the motion against pacifism is for losers. Thank you so much for all of this debate. Manpreet Vohra, Mukulika Banerjee, come up. Manpreet Vohra, Mukulika Banerjee, Yaroslav Trofimov, Georgina Godwin, Gideon Levy, Salil Tripathi, and Vir Sanghvi. Thank you all. Devika, Arpit, Abhay Uday, thank you all for managing the front lawn and being such wonderful hosts for us. Go for it. Georgina wants you to take a selfie with the. We can do that. Yeah, okay. And I'm going to also, while they're saying thank you to our authors, thank our colleague Ela for looking after all our author liaison, to Basu Mitra and our camera crew management, to our still photography crew, which is the Sharma Studios and Brahma Studios, to Dreamcast for the live streaming and all of the logistics that they do, to our security people who've kept us safe, Sandeep and Tejas and their whole crew, for feeding us Debraj Mohanty and his crew, to the disaster management and control, TIEMS India, to our festival outreach partner, Pratham Books, to website Dheeraj and Maya, for our internet solutions, Praval and Manoj, to all of the people who are helping with the merchandising, with this Geetan, Manish, Happy, and their colleagues, to our finance and accounts colleagues, Neeraj Agarwal, Shiju, Amit, Digambar, and Ashish, to our CRM management, Rajan, our office staff back home in Team Wakats, and back to you. Thank you so much. And to my boss, Karthik, for looking after me for 5 days and making sure I get to the place and being in control.